Most guys think social dynamics are about confidence. They're not. They're about control. How you take it, how you avoid it, or how you pretend you don't want it. So there's three pillars here of mogging. The first one is control, or the framer. These are the men who create the reality, and then you live within that frame. Then there's the deflectors. The deflectors can't handle the frame, so they redirect the energy. They like to play defense. And then finally you have the withholders. The withholders starve you. They gray rock you. They try to win by silence. So let's just let this all wash over you. Who keeps texting me? Let's just let all of this wash over us here. So we got the mayor, we got the birthday boy, we got the Redditor, devil's advocate, poker face, and the lurker. So the framers are the mayors and the birthday boys. The mayor is like your boomer Superman. A lot of boomers here, but you don't have to be boomer age in order to be a mayor. But just because you're not boomer age doesn't mean you aren't capable of acting like a boomer. And I got the Superman thing from, I have to give the assist here to Cassie David. Cassie David, who released her own video, TikTok, Instagram, about how there's three different types of men who want to be superheroes. You got either we're Superman, we're Batman, like quiet and stoic, or we're Spider-Man. But I'm trying to do my own thing here. Then there's the birthday boy, who's like magnetic, but can be very highly unstable and needs the spotlight to exist. So the mayor wants control of the frame via like acts of service and just like showing he's the man, whereas the birthday boy just kind of wants your attention. Then, so the deflectors, the tennis players, the ones who want like to play defense, we have the Redditor or lawyer, but I like Redditor better because I think it's funny and it cuts more. Redditors are safe, but they can be draining, and they use rules as a human shield. And then we have the devil's advocate, who is like the social anarchist. These can be dangerous if unchecked. And then finally, rounding out the withholders, we have who keeps texting me? Is that a Redditor texting me constantly? Who is flooding? Who is monopolizing my attention right now? Is it a birthday boy or is it a Redditor? And then finally, with the withholders, we have the poker face and the lurkers, or the chat room guys. So the poker face are like the cool, evasive, silent gravity types who they're kind of stoic. They don't really say much. And then the lurker is like the group chat guy, or the DM sniper, sideways triangulation. We'll get into it. So let's start with, and then we have 5 sliders here. These are like the RPG, the role-playing game stats. So we have Riz, which is like active social pull, charm, verbal output, wit, and engagement. And then we have aura, which is passive presence. You might be wondering, like, oh, what's the difference between Riz and aura? So Riz is like active social pull, whereas aura is more passive, and it's what people feel when you're not there or you're not necessarily speaking. Who is texting me nonstop? So like the people with aura have like a natural mystique. So if you have high aura, that means you draw eyes, but if you have low aura, it means you drain the room. Then we have agency, which is action, initiative, your desire to move the room and change the narrative. Then we have tryhardery. I couldn't find a word or a phrase to signify try hardness or try hard. So when I was coming up with this video, I was driving my wife's car back to our house, and I was like trying to figure out the video, and I just landed on try harder, and I kept mentioning the word tryhardery. And as I was pulling into the driveway, my wife's Bluetooth activated, and she was on the phone with her mom. And her mom, like, the call went through the Bluetooth, so I was now directly talking to her mom when I pulled into the driveway, right after I said tryhardery. And her mom, in a very Jewish old lady voice, her mom isn't Jewish, but it sounded very Jewish, she said, tryhardery? So tryhardery is like visible effect that lowers status. So the amount of visible sweat and effort you put into socially. You can also call this cringe or good if you want. And then finally, there's risk, which is willingness to expose yourself socially, how willing you are to look foolish or to crash the vibe. All right, so let's talk about the framers first, which are so first of all, we got the mayor or the boomer Superman. Wants control of the room, is at his best, he organizes things. At his worst, he just kind of yaps endlessly. Under pressure, he doesn't lose control. But he just tries to overdo it, and that's why the try-hardery kind of just like stacks. So he's dominant, but he can also be like, he can take care of you. He'll buy you drinks, he'll buy you dinner, he'll buy you gifts, but he can also be exhausting with the constant yapping. So a lot of positive feedback loops, as you can see with the boomer Superman here, which explains the lack of aura. Nobody's really ever missing him because he's always in the frame. Mayors do have attention. They score. So their pressure point is they can become kind of like a petty tyrant if they don't get their way. So yeah, we'll put a pin in that one for now. Next, we have the other framer is the birthday boy. So the birthday boy, like I said, wants your attention, but there's like an interesting paradox here. They score high on Riz, but also high on try-hardery. They have zero aura because you can always see the gears turning. You can actively feel like the need for a birthday boy's validation, which neutralizes the Riz, which is kind of what I said, but in a different way. So a good example of like a birthday boy is like someone who is like very fun to talk to, but then they're pretty prone to flaking. Like the birthday boys are the type of men who will like get really excited to go to an event with you, and then they'll cancel on you at the last minute. And then they will invite themselves over to your house next week on less than an hour short notice. Sometimes they might literally be like in the driveway. So like your living room or your house becomes like an emergency room for their ego and attention. Okay, next up we have the deflectors. So of course, like I said, we have the Redditor. Pretty also like the framers, they have they score high on try-hardery, so we're still kind of like don't get it twisted, the Redditors, like, they do want the frame occasionally, but the way they want it is kind of sideways. So, like, some, like, E-celeb type of Redditors would be, like, an Elon Musk or a Destiny. They score very highly on the autism side of things. They can lack social intuition. Their weapons are code and rules, logic. Facts don't care about your feelings. You could throw Ben Shapiro in there if you want, and I would like to. Their goals are like safe and predictable. But it's important here. There's like two different types of Redditors. There's the types who have like, they score low on risk. There's some that score low on risk, like -2. These are kind of like your common normie type of Redditors. But then like, you might be thinking, what, Destiny and Elon Musk, they have high risk. They're kind of like the apex Redditors, because they have a lot of followers. So that's the difference between like an e-celeb apex Redditor and a normie Redditor. So like, they can be fun to talk to if you want to like if you like talking to somebody who knows a lot about a very specific subject. And I love Redditors or lawyers, whichever one you want to call them. But they can all like, I feel like I'm being pretty hard on them now because I do know a lot, and they've had a pretty like good run on top, but I feel like their influence is kind of like coming to an end, mostly because like a Redditor at their worst loves to strip the humanity out of the conversation. Not all Redditors, but the Redditors at their absolute worst. So on the other side of the deflector, we have the devil's advocate. So if the Redditor were the autistic types, the like over-explaining with logic and kind of boring you to death, like a Colin Robinson energy vampire type, devil's advocates are more like schizo-posting types. So, another more E-celeb examples, you could think of like J-Reg or Sam Hyde. Their weapons are irony and chaos, and their goal is system collapse. Even though like J-Reg is currently on Christianity arc, which is interesting, and I'll be following that one closely. No, like adopt an exaggerated caricature of your position. Which is why it's fun that, like, in the deflectors, you couldn't have two, like, you have polar opposites. So you have the autistics, and then you have you have a lot of autism and schizo energy within the entire deflector framework, which is fun. And because it's fun, like, talking shit about Redditors, you can, like, a devil's advocate can pretty easily defeat a Redditor. You can find a flaw in their data, but a Redditor is usually pretty smart, so it is pretty hard to find a flaw in their data. So the trick with, like, if mogging a Redditor isn't to play their game, it's to keep playing your own schizo game. Because you can never really defeat a devil's advocate, because the second you think you have him, he just says, yeah, I'm mentally ill. Why are you arguing with me? So one likes to argue. The devil's advocate, well, the Redditor likes to argue when they feel like they're pressured, where the devil's advocate just kind of wants to, like, I don't know. That's why you get a lot of, like, Joker. That's where the devil's advocate can plummet to and lose a lot of their Riz and aura, is when they just become way too much like the Joker, and it just becomes try-hard incel energy. Okay, and finally we're going to be looking at the... I should have put these on. I can't read any of this. We're going to be looking at the Withholders here. Whoa. So we have the poker face, and we have the lurkers here under Withholders. So the poker face is like your cold professional, your cold pro, you know, like their default state is stoic. I'm just gonna take these off. So a poker face isn't hiding necessarily, whereas I would say a lurker is more like a ghost. A poker face is a wall. That doesn't mean they're, like, lazy. They don't have much of an emotional investment in the room or the frame. They want to have control of the frame, but in a very, like, pragmatic, practical way. Like, poker faces are really good at driving you places. They're really good at doing, like, setting the dinner table. They're good at, like, very low risk. They hate emotional responsibility, but they don't mind, like, low stakes responsibility activities, like I just said. Like, driving can be very responsible, especially if you're driving for a lot of hours at the time. This gives the poker face kind of a way to opt out of the conversation, which is based, I would say, like, if you don't have anything to say, you don't want to talk, I would say that's quite admirable of you, and I mean that unironically. I think I enjoy poker faces, and, like, yeah, under pressure, this is another reason why Redditors can become annoying really fast, because, like, under pressure, a Redditor will argue with you, whereas a poker face just kind of abandons and will they'll get up and leave if they feel, like, especially pressured or singled out, probably. So the lurker, this is a really interesting one, because when I was first assembling this list, this was the one I didn't really care about, because, again, kind of like the lurker is like the devil's advocate at, like, its absolute lowest. At least that's what I thought at first. But then I realized I was kind of being unfair to the lurker. So the lurker is like the disassociated survivor. In their pressure state, they become a ghost. Like, they disassociate. They're in survival mode. They refuse the frame entirely. In their worst state, they're kind of like a gooner or an incel, where they're just kind of, like, jacking off all the time and not participating, not posting. They're just kind of being weird, and nobody really knows they're there because they never participate in the frame. And also, unlike, like, they won't even offer to drive either, because they're kind of, like, outside their own body. But, like, I kind of identify with the lurkers, because I agree, like, I have been a lurker in my life, like, because if you speak, you open yourself up to a vulnerability. So people who want to mog you, which is, I would say, all of men, because we can't help ourselves, we have this unconscious, I don't even call it will, desire, drive to just mog any type of person, including a lurker. So a lurker feels very exposed at all times. That's why they kind of just want to be a ghost. They don't want to be seen, and they don't want to haunt in their default state. They just kind of want to chill and enjoy the frame without much participation. Now, why I say this can be a good thing, I love this example. The example is somebody who grew up in a religious household, or grew up kind of like in a cult-like situation. I don't want to single out any religion here, but because I don't want to sound like a Redditor. But say like you grew up in an evangelical cult or religion or church, whatever you want to call it, and you kind of realize even at a very young age you have very high intuition, and you can sense when things are weird or people are acting in their best interest and not in your best interests. And they kind of like are always like bragging about what they do and and they like to talk shit about other people too. So this is, so if you choose not to participate in this, if you choose to kind of just like disassociate yourself and take yourself out of your body in a way where you cannot be manipulated by this, even I would say at a very young, if you're a child and you're able to do this and you're able to like get past it and overcome it and get through to the other side, that is based. I respect every lurker who has been able to do that at a young age. But yeah, like, you don't want to always be a lurker. You don't always want to be a lurker. It's not good for you. So before we conclude here, I just want to go over some matchups. I got 3 scenarios here, just a very general sense. So this is scenario A. I call this the active versus passive. So we'll take the mayor, like a mayor and a poker face here. So the mayor tries to impress the poker face because maybe the mayor has been, he's been telling his stories all night. He's been buying drinks for the table. He's ordering appetizers, but he notices there's a poker face who's like being really quiet. Has like high aura, but is not giving the mayor anything. So the mayor stacks up his tryhardery, trying to impress by getting the poker face to laugh, or maybe then like wants to get like any kind of reaction, even a bad reaction out of the out of the poker face. But then if the poker face maintains his high level of aura, he just kind of like knows that he can just kind of like stare at the mayor for like a few seconds and let like the awkwardness of the mayor wash over him. And that can bump the tryhardery up to a 3, I would say, for a mayor. Obviously, poker faces don't always get along with mayors or Redditors. Because the silent treatment isn't necessarily based. Now, this is the birthday boy, or this is the poker face when the poker face is no longer willing to play up the stoicism, and they kind of fall into like birthday boy, low form of birthday boy reactivity, which I will get back to when I go through the C scenario. Okay, scenario B, we'll call this one the public versus private destruction, or the devil's advocate versus the lurker. So this might give you more of an insight into like the difference between these two. So like a devil's advocate will drop a public bomb to kind of disrupt the table, whereas a lurker, again, like this is an example of a lurker maybe doing some form of like triangulation where they whisper. So think of the guy from Game of Thrones, the bald guy. I can't think of his name. The eunuch, the guy with no testicles. He whispers to the guy next to him to be like, look how ridiculous this frame is. Maybe a mayor or a birthday boy is like monopolizing the frame to an obnoxious degree. And another thing and this is why I said group chat guy earlier with the lurker. Like the lurker can also be like, the lurker can be a shit starter, but a shit starter in like a very specific way where they might just do like a one-off with do some triangulation where they might talk to one other person sideways in the group and be like, look how silly this whole thing is. Then the last matchup I want to do is we'll call it the validation parasite versus the safety inspector. So this is like a birthday boy versus a Redditor. So I said earlier that I don't think a Redditor, when they're feeling pressured, or even when they're they're not trying to be mean, but they just can't help themselves sometimes to explain with their safe, accurate data. Like sometimes they can't help but pull the plug on the birthday boy's kind of hype machine. So you could get a scenario where a birthday boy sets up a high value experience-based question. Like imagine you are in a group chat with two other friends, or you're at the bar, or wherever people go these days, a third space, and you're with two of your good buds, your bros. And instead of engaging in this like really interesting question that the birthday boy poses, and the question, we'll make it specific here. Let's say one person in the group has lived both in Detroit and Chicago, but then the Redditor latches on to the fact that you said Detroit and Chicago when technically may or may not have ever lived in Chicago in their lives, but makes sure to point out to the person acting in the birthday boy mode that living that like the other friend who he's now speaking on behalf of, technically never lived in Chicago. And then ends by saying LOL to kind of like which is like an ultimate -2 risk move because it's a passive aggressive buffer. Again, I don't think the Redditor is meaning any, like, doesn't intend harm here. Again, he just can't help himself. And this is the kind of tryhardery at work. But then this is the tryhardery of the birthday boy, because then the birthday boy can either act really triggered, and this is where you can get a birthday boy getting into like really Karen-like behavior, where if they don't get their way, they start copying an attitude, they start acting older than they are. Yeah, and it can go really bad really quickly for the birthday boy, because then their tryhardery goes up and then their aura just plummets. So yeah, that's it. I think we've covered everything. I don't know. If you like this type of content, like and subscribe.